Efka, I'm a bit sad.
Where is this going?
Well, I still don't know what people's favourite haggises are.
No one... Oh, that's right. No one emailed.
No, not a single person let us know where you can get good haggis in or out of Scotland.
Listen, we have at least 20 listeners on this podcast, right? One of them must be...
I mean, one of them's my mum, but...
Right, doesn't matter. One of them...
She's never had haggis, I don't think.
One of them must be a haggis aficionado, is what I'm trying to say.
I mean, statistically, not likely, right?
No, 1 in 20 has to be in the world a lover of haggis.
1 in 20 people worldwide are a lover of haggis. An aficionado, not just a lover.
Yeah, I mean, haggis is amazing. Why wouldn't that be the correct statistic?
I mean, I can't fault your logic there. Welcome to Talk Cardboard, a podcast about board games and everything adjacent with me, Elaine, and you,
Efka.
On today's episode, we'll be looking for spooky gems and avoiding spooky spectres in the spooky game of Spectral, making camel caravans in the 24-year-old Keynes classic Through the Desert, and cheering up giant monsters by cutting off the bits that make them mean in Leviathan Wilds.
You were on such a roll, I didn't want to interrupt you, but there were so many spookies in there. Right?
Well, I want to set the tone for this game.
Okay, well, I think you're leaving out the most important part, right? Is that this is the popsicle special. So listeners might not be aware, but we are now proud owners of a second dog. He is a miniature schnauzer called Sydney, and he is, as all puppies, a menace. And... so this might be a little bit hectic because he is currently right now on the floor munching on a chew bone.
Yeah.
So things are quiet, but at any point we might have to be like,
Get out the plant, Sydney.
Yeah, just be prepared for that. This is going to be...
He's much easier than Bessie was as a puppy in some ways and more difficult in other ways.
Exactly.
They're very different personalities.
Incredibly different. They're finally starting to get on, so that's good. But Sydney likes to eat all the plants, it seems. And
which Bessie never did.
Yeah, which we need to be on the lookout for. So if we suddenly start screaming and running off, this is why.
But hopefully he'll be quiet with his chew bone right now. Right?
Yeah, for now.
For a little bit.
For now. And then hell will start.
Well, yeah, maybe. We'll see. Should we talk about some games, though?
Let's talk about board games and forget about the puppy.
We can never forget about the puppy, but Spooky Spectral comes from publisher Bitewing Games by designer Ryan Courtney with art by Bridget Indelicato.
This is going to be a difficult one because I know you like this more than I do. Yes. I still like it. I think it's pretty good, but I think it's a very weirdly specific game that's going to appeal to a very specific niche of people, and I'm not sure how many enthusiasts of that niche there are because I didn't think this niche existed before.
What niche?
So the niche is that this is a deduction game, right? So think like Codenames or Decrypto or Letter Jam or Turing Machine. You know, it's that kind of jam where you're trying to figure out and search for Planet X, right? You're trying to piece together information from incomplete bits, and then you gain more information and kind of put the whole picture together. And in this case, it's a competitive game, not a cooperative. So you're trying to do it before another player, and you win Spectral by scoring more points effectively. But the twist here, and this is a big twist. This is, I think, a genre-defying twist.
I was going to say twisticle, but that would be a small twist. What would be a big twist?
Twistato.
Twistato.
Right?
Potato?
No,
like
potato. No, not like a potato. What is this? No, a tornado. You know, a twistato.
Oh.
Right? Like a twister and a tornado in one.
I see. All right.
We should patent that name. That's
for what?
That's for whatever, branding later, IP merchandise.
Okay. I mean, I made up twisticle, I think.
Twisticle is good. I don't think it's as strong as...
You're thinking about it now.
I don't think it's as strong as Twistato, to be fair.
That's true. Anyway, please continue.
Yes, we're talking about a
What
board
is this
game.
big twist?
So the big twist in Spectral is that this is also a bidding game, and you're kind of bidding for information, but also you're bidding for area control in a kind of bizarre way that I'm gonna say it works, right? I think it works, but it also creates like this strange environment where you are basically bidding to be in places where the game ordained that, you know, there's more points at the end of the game. And you figure that out via this deduction puzzle, right? And so I think this creates a sort of like a gambling scenario almost in a deduction game where I think some people are going to be left very cold by it because there is an element of chance and risk that is greater than in other deduction games, say like the Search for Planet X or for Letter Jam. Letter Jam is cooperative, right? But you sort of get the idea. Like you are bidding on information, and the information I don't think is ever going to be complete, even because you don't assemble the full picture. You just have to hedge your bets in Spectral and kind of go, I think this place might be good, I think this place might be bad, and we will find out when the game ends, and maybe I made the good bet or the bad bet. And actually the bidding mechanism reminds me a lot of Keyflower. It's
right.
It's very it's a similar bidding mechanism where you're placing some meeples effectively on a spot to say, I want to be here at the end of the game. And also I want to look at one of the pieces of information here. But then someone can bump you out of that place by placing twice the number of pieces into that location and effectively booting you out, and then also looking at some information there and being there at the end of the game.
Yeah, it's got the same mechanism.
Yeah, unless someone boots you out again. And so, but if someone boots you out, you get your pieces back so you can place them somewhere else. So it is Keyflower in that regard, right? But it's also a strange deduction game on top of that. So I think what I've been alluding is describing the deduction game, because describing it on the podcast is quite weird, and I'm not sure I can do it well, but I'm gonna give my best, right? So imagine a 4x4 grid of cards, right? Now nobody can see what's underneath those cards. Nobody knows what it is, but bit by bit you're gonna find out. So whenever you place your piece, you place it in between two cards. Anywhere there is a gap between two cards, you can place a piece, and then you can take one of those cards and privately have a look at what it says, and then note it down on your actual notepad. The game comes with these like notepads, but you have a grid there on your notepad on every page, and you know when you play a game, you pick one page and then start writing information down there. It's kind of pre-gridded for you. So the weird part, that seems like self-explanatory. That's normal. The weird part is that when you look at the card will basically tell you that there is either a diamond or a skull on the card. If it's a diamond, you want to know where diamonds are, because diamonds provide 12 points at the end of the game, effectively. If no one else is adjacent, you're the only person adjacent to that diamond, you get the 12 points. The skulls are bad because the curses. So the curses themselves eliminate any bidding meeples that are adjacent to a curse. So you don't want to be next to a curse. So what, do you like place a piece, discover that there's a curse underneath, and like, oh no, I placed this piece incorrectly? No, that's the weird gimmick of the game, because the information that's on the card doesn't refer to what's on that card. It points to a different card and then says, on this different card, there will be a diamond or a curse. And so thus, a single location could have like multiple things on it, because different cards point in different ways. And so you might find out that at the end of the game, like let's say row A number 3 has actually 2 diamonds, great, but also 1 curse, useless, right? And someone through the course of the game might find out that there's 2 diamonds on this A3 card, but actually not find out that there's a curse, think, oh, this place is great, put some meeples down, And then when all the information is real, it's like, there was a curse there. Oh no, So it's that kind of thing. Where it gets really bizarre is that there's like 4 different ways that a card points to another card. So it can mirror it, which means it's like on the other side of the board in the same column. It can trace a clockwise line. It can point to diagonals, and there's 2 different diagonals. And I'm not even going to try to explain the diagonals on the podcast because it's so super visual. But basically, it points to places. So the card you flip, it'll say something, but it will not say it about the card that you've just flipped. It will point to a different place on the map. Did that make sense?
Yes, you made it a very good explanation of it, I think, for such a, like you said, visual game where the whole point of the game is looking at things, right? I think you made that explanation really well. And also, thank you for doing that whilst Sydney, I was watching Sydney because he was being a menace and running around. So thank you for doing all of that. You did it really well. I'm surprised you weren't able to concentrate on that, but you did because you're a pro.
Am I a pro? I don't know. I feel like I'm getting all this praise out of nowhere. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I'll accept it graciously rather than be like, oh, sure, whatever,
One thing I wanted to say, pick you up on like halfway through that explanation was that, because it's like a race to learn the information quickest. You're like, because you said you're never going to learn all of the information. You're never going to have this perfect idea of where everything is, because you want to be the first to kind of pass, and because you get points for not placing the meeples as well.
Right, yeah. So if you have meeples remaining, you effectively get 4 points per. It depends on the player count in the game.
They're not insignificant, though.
Yeah, they are not insignificant, and that's kind of the weird part of the game is that you think, okay, but like 4 points is not as good as 12 points. If I place one meeple and I get 12, there's a limited number of these 12-point things, and like you can try and boot some people out, but like especially in a 2-player game, you find that like the numbers just don't add up, and you actually want to use as little meeples as possible whilst getting as many of these diamonds as possible.
I like a deduction game anyway. I like almost all the games that you mentioned when you said it's a game like la 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 la.
Yeah,
I like almost all of those, right? A lot. I like figuring out things. I like learning things about things and putting information together. So this for me filled that hole, I guess. It's not spooky at all, though. I only
do you not think?
No. I mean, no. It's mechanical. Like, it's very mechanical. There's no spectres or whatever. You're just moving pieces around, putting pieces down and seeing if you get curses or diamonds, really. But learning that information for me was fun, and seeing you. So I couldn't actually see, obviously, what you're writing down, and I can't see what you're looking at, but I can see your face. And like me, you have no poker face. We've mentioned this before. So like the way that you looked at cards and your eyebrows went up or they went down or whatever. I was
I'm learning things about myself here.
And I know I do the same thing. I look at something and go, oh, and like it's clear like whether this information is useful to me or not. So it's fun. That kind of, although there's no real interaction in this game because you're doing it separately, you're figuring out the puzzle separately.
Until there is, because you boot someone out.
Well, that's
and it's
true.
Like, oh, you, right?
That's true. And I know a couple of times you put something down. No, I put something down, then you booted me out. And I thought, whoa, this space must be really good. You must know more about this than me. So I thought, okay, well, I'll boot you out then. And then when I did, or I put it, so it would also score in like an adjacent line, so it would also score. It turned out that it wasn't actually very good because there was a piece of information that you didn't know, and neither did I. So it's that kind of like hedging your bets a little bit, of maybe this person knows something that I don't. Okay, I'm gonna maybe try, or would put something. The thing is, so it definitely. Like a lot of deduction games, I think if you have a good start, then you will do better. Because if you feel that you know a lot of information and you've been lucky in where you've put your meeples, so where you have, because I had a game where we had a game where I put down a meeple randomly to see what a card was, and it turned out to be like a 2 diamond square that I'd put it next to. So it ended up scoring me well, and I ended up putting 2 things next to it.
Yeah.
So it ended up scoring me really well. And then, the opposite can happen where you end up not accidentally, like by chance, putting your meeple next to a square that's a curse, right? So, and then you go, well, I'm not scoring. And then you're just hoping that the other person doesn't know information that you do, and they boot you out and put theirs next to it instead. So that kind of to and fro, I really enjoyed. And the figuring out the puzzle and the figuring out what you knew, or trying to mind meld with you and trying to figure out what you knew compared to what I knew. And that when there was a point when I still didn't know quite a lot of information and you passed, and I was like, oh no, because you know a lot more than I do, obviously. But then I had another go, and then you had another go, because you're like, oh no, okay, I'm going to get back in this game and learn. So I like the fact that if you pass, you're not passed forever as long as the other person doesn't pass.
Yeah.
Like that for me was fun, because again, it's kind of hedging your bets a little bit. If I pass now, maybe I'll score better than they will, because maybe I know a bit more, but then it gives them another opportunity to learn more and maybe play. There's a lot of that kind of stuff. And I really enjoyed that.
So there's a number of things that you mentioned that I want to kind of converse about, I guess.
Converse?
Yeah, I said a funny word. I knew it when I said it. This is a nonsense word, but I'm going to go for it. I've committed now. Anyway, first of all, is there ever a board game that's scary? I don't think board games can do horror, right? Because horror isn't about being scary. Horror is about making
anticipation.
That's anticipation is like when you have jump scares, right?
Yeah.
But like horror, good horror at least, is stuff that makes you feel uncomfortable and introspective, right? I guess maybe John Company is a scary game, because that's a game that I still haven't played it, but I'm sure I'll get to it, right? But judging from Tom's coverage from Shut Up and Sit Down, it can make you feel really uncomfortable, right? So that to me leans more, or a game like Meltwater, right? Or a game like The Cost, right? So they're not like spooky, like, ooh, there's ghosts, but they are dealing with like really kind of difficult, horrific subjects, and in that way make you feel uncomfortable. That to me leans towards horror.
But I'm not sure that ghosts are really ever spooky, unless you're 5. They're not.
Right.
They're not,
no. Yeah. Exactly.
The theme of ghosts isn't particularly scary, even in films or whatever.
No, but I think that's the only way that board games can do scary. Is what I'm saying.
Yes.
That's the only way they can make you feel uncomfortable. This is just silly. I don't know why I'm going in this digression, but I just wanted to. I just felt like it.
What about the game with the skull tower that made noises? That was quite scary. What was that called?
Return to Dark Tower. That
yeah.
wasn't scary.
Yeah, it was when it went woo, like the skull would like shift it. Not the skull, the tower shifted, and I know that was.
We did a sketch at the beginning of our video where you're like, "Is this it?"
I know, but it was like going in a ghost house. It was that kind of situation. See, a ghost house isn't really scary, but you're right. Like, I think a game has the capacity to make you feel very uncomfortable, and that, I guess, for some people is a kind of scary.
Yeah.
But not necessarily, because if I feel uncomfortable in a game, it makes me appreciate what the game is teaching me, rather than being annoyed by it or frightened by it or whatever.
But you can be frightened by a game, I think. If it makes you introspective enough to be really uncomfortable, you might want to be like, I'm not sure I want to engage with this, right?
I think subject matter does make a difference. I think maybe if I was, and the thing with horror or being scared is that it is very subjective. So if I would happily play a game about spiders, because I love spiders, right? But people that feared spiders wouldn't necessarily want to play that, because it would give them the ick. Whereas, like, I have a fear of being trapped,
right.
Or being stuck in a cellar kind of situation. Being Yeah. Anyway, so
I can see the heebie-jeebies on you.
a game about that would give me the ick and would give me fear, right? So people's fears are subjective. So you're right. I mean, I don't think this game is supposed to be scary.
No.
It's supposed to be like,
I think we're going on a very big tangent.
like a ghost house and just be a little bit spooky and fun. And,
do you want me to reel it back in?
Please.
Okay, so the one thing I find interesting and compelling, and maybe the one thing that doesn't necessarily make Spectral a game for me as much as it does for you, I still like it. I like it quite a bit. Is that it feels like deduction, which is all about like, you know, perfect information almost, and gambling effectively are such polar opposites that they're very juxtaposed, and when you combine them into one thing, I wonder how much people are gonna gel with it, right? And like I gel with it, I'm cool with it, but I wonder if most people are gonna feel the same way about it as we do, because if you think about it, a lot of people who like deduction games like them because there is no element of chance, right? There is no gambling, there's no anything like that, and here a lot of things are left up to chance, you know. So for example, when you begin the game and you start bidding with your meeples and like looking at cards, you know nothing. You're a blank slate, right? And those early draws. So in one of our games that we played, I drew a skull, and then a skull, and then a skull, and then I drew one diamond, and then the fifth card was a skull, right? Now, by that point, right, I've spent only like mostly just my lowest value meeples, because the meeples are, the way they're done, they're like glued together. So if you have value 1, it's just like one piece, and if you have value 2, it's 2 of these pieces glued together. So you can't make change, right? And the more you spend of them, the more points you lose effectively, right? So I spent my lowest value meeples to know where all the dead zones were. So logically, my advantage was that if I place, wherever I place meeples next, I'm probably, you know, it's either going to be nothing, but it's probably going to be some points, right? So all my bets remaining were pretty good. And I don't think you had the same information. And worth noting, I still lost that game because I ended up, you know, being a little bit too
blasé.
Yeah, blasé about it. I was like, oh, I know where all the good stuff is. It's just, oh, right, I spent too many meeples.
And that's what I was saying about if you start well, then you're probably going to do better eventually. Or well, maybe not. Maybe not. That's the thing, right? I can see why people would bounce off of that completely. But for me, like, it's just part of the game. Like, it doesn't mean that you're going to win if you know this good information, because you still don't know where the diamonds are. Like, you could also, if you wanted to, pass on. I don't think there's no rule in the rule book that says you can't. You could pass in the first round. Like, you could immediately say pass and hope that the other player just kept putting their meeples next to skulls. Like, you could, but you don't, because that's not the game, right?
Right.
So I think you have to take this game for what it is. If you know all the different elements of this, that there is a kind of gambling, there is a booting people out, there is that to and fro, there is not the possibility to get perfect information, maybe. I mean, there is the possibility, but you just would not probably win because you'd have no meeples left.
Yeah, well, there is. You don't need to know everything. There's a lot of working out you can do because all the rows are predefined sets of cards. So, for example, there's a set A, set B, set C, set D. So you don't know which row D will end up being, but as soon as you open one card, you know, oh, that's a D card.
Yeah.
So this entire row is D. So you know that the other 3 cards in that row, what cards they will be. You don't know what order they are in yet, but and then bit by bit you kind of learn more about the game, and you can actually deduce quite a bit, and also you can make deductions based on what other players do. And it was really interesting because, like, obviously I can't see what you see, right? But if I know one of these 2 cards right, is a skull that's mirroring like another card. So I know that like, if I think at this top row there is a mirror skull, then that means at the bottom row there will be that curse placed somewhere, right? And I can look at where you've placed your things and go, well, if you know where this skull is, then you wouldn't have placed there, right? So you can there's some interesting information you can glean, or you can sort of try and guess maybe based on what other players have done. But you're also, like, when you know 3 cards in a row, for example, you'll know what the 4th card is by default, So there is stuff you can do and, to work things out. But it isn't as evident as in games like Turing Machine.
No, of course.
Or actually, I've just been reading some conversations on our Discord, and people were mentioning that, like, they've played games of Turing Machine where someone worked it all out without doing a single test, just looked at all the information.
Whoa.
Right, I know, yeah, I know. and I've seen games of Cryptid like that as well, where someone worked it out before the game began. They just went, it's there. And they were like, it is. Okay, game's over,
a bit like
right?
that first game of Turing Machine that we had, where I just randomly guessed the right number immediately. But I hadn't figured anything out. It was just a pure guess.
It was just a complete guess.
That was bizarre. Never done that again. I should never been that lucky again. You're right. Because you're working out, like you said, if you know 3 cards in the row, you know the 4th. If you know 2 cards in the row, then you know what the other 2 are, but just not which is which. So then you're thinking like, well, if this is this one, then the diamond will be there. And if this is this one, then the diamond will be there. So, it's that kind of deduction. There is a lot of guesswork in it, and maybe you get lucky and maybe you don't. For some people that might not be quite enough, but I had a lot of fun with it, and I think you did too, just not quite as much fun as
I'm not as strong on it as you are, but I did have a nice time and an interesting time. Just before we wrap this up, there's some modules and like a mini expansion. We played one of the modules, the freeze cards, so that was a peculiar twist. I'm not sure I dug as much as the base game. It certainly made things more complicated because, like, instead of... So, this is going to be weird to explain. Because when you flip a card over, it points to another card. But that card itself also has, like, what's on that space. But that space also has a card, and that card will point at something as well. And what the freeze card does is, if you flip a freeze card, it'll point at a card and say, oh, there's a diamond there or a skull there, right? But it'll also freeze that card in that location. So when you go to that location, whatever that card has on it will not actually point to another card, but will stay where it is. Weird to explain, weird to experience. I'm not sure I dug it as much as the base game because... that changed the tenor of the game so much. Like, I didn't open a single freeze card in the entire game until my very last draw, by which I was absolutely certain, and that was chance again. I was absolutely certain I knew where nothing was, right? Because I didn't know that the information I've so far uncovered was frozen and thus incorrect, or not frozen and thus correct. So everything was up in the air and I had a bad game.
Yeah, we did only play that once though, didn't we?
Yeah.
And you had a bad game with it. So maybe that's like that situation. I don't know how common that would be. I think that was just real chance that you did that. So I don't know how I feel about it. I didn't mind it. It brought in a bit more complexity, because you think you know where something is, but suddenly you don't, because that diamond's not actually there. So I don't know. I don't know how I felt about it. I really liked the base game. I need to play it more, I think, with the expansions to figure out if I like them or not.
I just don't want to try the expansions after that. I don't know. I had such a miserable game of it. I was like, this is not fun. I'm not
And
enjoying
that happens
myself.
sometimes.
Yeah. I guess I need to give it another chance. And one final note. This is by designer Ryan Courtney. So designer of Pipeline, Trailblazers, Curious Cargo, Bear Raid. Like all of his games, it has that Ryan Courtney edge where it's some of it is quite brain breaking in a way that feels like no other game out there. It really makes you twist those cogs, if that makes sense. You kind of need to sit there and go, this is hurting my brain, but I need to figure this out. It gives you that feeling. So if you like that, if you like chance in your deduction games, a bit of whimsy and vim, Spectral's cool.
Let's move on to our next game, the Canis Classic. Through the Desert comes from publisher All Play by designer Reiner Knizia with art by Damien Mamoliti.
Is this where we admit that we haven't played Through the Desert up until this very point, until this latest edition?
We don't need to say that.
Do we not say it?
No, I don't
Just cut that bit out of the podcast. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Nobody will know.
No. Anyway.
Through the Desert, what a classic. We've been playing it forever. We love this game. New edition out. Camels, right? Always loved them. Yeah. No, okay, so here's my story why I never played Through the Desert. So some of you might be familiar with John Perkis from Actual Law. John, at a convention once said, have you played Blue Lagoon? And I said, I haven't. And he said, oh, it's great. It's by Reiner Knizia. It's basically the sequel to Through the Desert. I'm like, okay, well, I've never played that, but I've heard good things about it. Let's try Blue Lagoon. Hated it. Absolutely hated it. I was like, this is miserable. There's way too many variables. I can't figure anything out. And it's impossible to predict what anyone is going to do. And it's like this weird push and pull. Don't like it. Yuck. Right? So I thought that Through the Desert was like that. Right? And thus never played it. I'm so very glad this new edition from All Play came out. It has a few production weirdness things. So I'm gonna get into that at the end of the bit. But all throughout, lovely production, lovely game, deservedly a classic. If you are after a light game that packs a mean punch and always keeps you on your toes, and when I say mean punch, I mean this game is mean, right? Through the Desert, my gosh, what a game. Who knew? Apparently everyone apart from us.
Tell us a bit more about the game. How do you play it? What does it do? What do?
You place camels,
oh,
right?
Wow.
So you have a board, a hexagonal board, a grid, if you will. And the grid has multiple elements that will let you score points. So there's oases. If you drag a caravan towards an oasis, you'll score 5 points. There's water holes. If you drag your caravan over water holes, they'll have tokens like 1, 2, or 3 points. You'll pick up those tokens, you'll have the 1, 2, or 3 points. And then if you're playing on the riverside, if you drag your caravan over the river, you'll get 5 points. That's pretty much all the things that you can pick up points from in terms of on the board, right? There's more things that you get points for in the game. But that's kind of it, right? And the way the game plays is that each player has 5 caravans. And they're caravans of different color, right? And every player has access to those 5 different colors. So there's teal, purple,
red, green.
Green.
No, is that yellow?
I think there's yellow. No, yellow is a player color.
No, the yellow player color is beige.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe there's yellow.
I think there's yellow.
Why
can't we remember? That's weird.
No, there's so many colors in the game.
I guess.
Because there's player colors, right? So your caravan leader will be of your player color, but it will have a camel underneath. That is of the camel caravan color, right? So, for example, if you're playing as blue, your little leader figure will be blue, but there might be a teal camel underneath that, and then all the camels you place are going to be teal. They're not going to be of your player color, right? And that's important. So, like in, say, TTR or whatever, right? Each hex has only space for one camel. So you're playing a game of snake, but there's 5 snakes for each player, right? So imagine a game of snake, and let's say this is a 4-player game of Through the Desert. There's 20 snakes, right? If that gives you that feeling, right? That's exactly what Through the Desert is going for. 20 snakes on one board. They're all going, right? The question is, which snake are you going to advance next? Because, you know, you only get to place 2 camels on your turn. You can mix and match colors. That's fine, right? So you can place 1 red, 1 purple. That's okay, right? But maybe red needs to get to this oasis before another player can cut you off, right? And so that's kind of the game, right? You're trying to create these like weird opportunities and be very aggressive, passive aggressive, you know, even with these placements, because you might place things where you're like just about threatening, right? So you're provoking an opponent to get in there and do something, but you're actually distracting them from, you know, getting to the point where you actually want to go, and you're like, aha, tricked you, now I'm gonna place here. Right? So it's a very aggressive game. It's a very mean game in that way, where you are constantly trying to trick other people on the table with your intentions and your placements. And of course it's almost like, you know, abstract piece like, so it's got that abstract game quality to it. Yeah, a lot of people compare Through the Desert to Go because it's like multiple, you know, kind of little skirmishes on the board rather than one big war in chess. And it's definitely got that vibe where you're kind of trying to manipulate the placements so that the advantage is to you, but in a way where you're obfuscating what you're doing and actually you're doing something else in time. It's that kind of thing.
I've never played Go, so I can't compare it to that. But there is that kind of thing that you have in noughts and crosses, to simplify it, where, you know, if you go here, you know that wherever the other player goes, you can still win, because if they go there, you can go there. If they go there, you can go there, and you can still win. And it had that kind of vibe about it. There was a lot of times when I thought, okay, if I put 2 camels here, then I can still, you can't block me off in one move, so I still have time to put camels over there, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. There was a lot of that of keeping, like, choosing which plate to keep spinning. You know, like, okay, I need to keep that one spinning right now. This one can wait for a little bit. But then when you come back to it, you realise it's already fallen on the floor because I didn't see I didn't see your plan. I didn't see how you tricked me. So there's a lot of trickery going on with it. It's a very simple concept, right? It's just putting camels out on the board. But it's so tricky to put them out right. Like, I thought I was doing well at one point, and then I realised she'd completely blocked me off, and my caravan, that specific caravan, was completely trapped. Like, I was going nowhere with it, and you somehow had kind of engineered it so I could never get to the oasis and never make my own little area, because you haven't explained scoring, like at the end where you score.
So the tricky
hexes.
part is getting to these oases, because each of your caravans can get to each of the 5 oases once, and so each caravan, like, it's impossible, but let's imagine a caravan can get to all 5 oases, right? That's 25 points just for that one caravan, but you have 5 caravans. So it is, of course, impossible to visit all the caravans and all the oases with all the caravans. And what makes it really tricky is when your caravan meets another player's caravan of the same color, because whilst different color caravans, right, can coexist next to each other, not in the same space, but next to each other, right? From different players. If they're of the same color, there always has to be a 1 hex gap between them. So that's very aggressive, right? And you can make some really bold moves by saying, okay, no one can go here anymore because we are too close to each other. So that's interesting. But But what makes that really sing is that there's this rule that you don't necessarily have to reach the things with your caravans. If you manage to draw an area with your caravan that sort of circles it, either circles it round
from one
or
edge to the board to the other edge.
Yeah, basically, and there's no caravans in that area. You effectively not just block it off for everyone, but you also gather everything that's in there as if you're connected to it. It's yours. Yeah, it's yours. And then you score 1 point per every empty hex in that closed-off area. It's really hard to engineer, but it can be a source of major points. So everyone's like carving these spaces for themselves. So it becomes like, 20 snakes on a board, but plus with Pac-Man, where if you eat it fast enough, that's yours now.
Yeah.
So
and like you said, you've got all these snakes, so you're trying to make carve out these areas for yourself, but there's genuinely always someone edging in on that too. They want that area too. So, and you can't block in someone else's caravan. If so, you can't carve out that area for you if there's already someone else's, or even yours, caravan in that area already. So it makes it really hard to create those areas and score those points for it. But we both managed to do it at points, didn't we?
Yeah.
Because I ended up in one of our games with a really massive area. I don't know
won you the game immediately. Yeah,
I don't know how. I don't know how you let me do that.
I don't know why I let you do that, but I've learned something in that game.
But the next game, I didn't score a single area in the next. I mean, maybe 2 or 3. Right? It was tiny areas, but I never managed to get an actual decent chunk of the board. So it is. I think it's one of those games that the more you play it, especially with the same person, or same people, the same play group, you will figure out everyone else's strategies and how they place their caravans and how you respond to that. What is the best way that you can make points out of what they're doing, right? And how you can block them off and how you can trick them and how you can, connect those oases and go over the point scoring hexagons. So there's a lot to it for something that looks quite simple. The concept is quite simple, but there's a lot within it.
Elaine, I think a lot of people have experienced Through the Desert. If you haven't, you owe yourself a play of this. I think it's a fun game, deservedly a classic. But what a lot of people haven't yet experienced is Through the Desert Bazaar, which is a new expansion that came out together with this new edition from the Keynes. It's Through the Desert, but one we can report on as if it's new, right?
Hooray!
So what
is new?
Well, an expansion that introduces 4 modules, right? So module number 1, it introduces a new scoring condition. What is the scoring condition? You draw from a deck of cards. It says you'll now score for this as well. Like, hey, most oases reached, it scores you 10 points. Or, hey, most watering hole tokens scores you however many points, right? So you get points for an extra thing now. Nothing fancy. You can put it in your game. It won't hurt anything. It's just a new thing, a new point of tension, a bit of zhuzh into Through the Desert. What is it good? It's fine. It's it's all right.
It's just another thing that you can score points from. Like, we didn't even mention that you score points for the longest caravan in each colour of caravan. There's just another thing that you can score points from.
Yeah. Nothing major, but doesn't hurt. I don't think it hurts the game in any way. It just makes it a little bit more dynamic, right? So that's module number 1. Module number 2, bazaars, right? So this is the one that I guess the expansion is named after, and I think it does add a significant element to the game. So now you, in addition to all the other scoring conditions, there's 3 places on the map that are bazaars, and you need to draw a caravan from a bazaar to a village. The first one to do so will score 15 points. The second one to do so, 10 points. The third one to do so will score 5 points. Now, you can be all of these free people, because if you draw 3 of your caravans, and the villages are at the edge of the board and the bazaars are in like the center of the board, so you have to carve this sort of line. And the thing about lines is that lines aren't circles, but you have to go to the edge of the board, so you want to make that into a circle as well, because you're like carving it adds an extra layer of complexity. I think it's interesting. I'm not sure how, the TTR aficionados will appreciate it, but it certainly added like a new wrinkle to the game that I didn't mind, and I thought made it more dynamic.
TTR aficionados?
I mean TTD, sorry.
Right.
Ticket to Ride.
This is
through
what
the
happens
desert.
when you start using acronyms.
I know. I just confused my acronyms. Then there's special watering holes. So that's module number 3. So instead of just having watering holes, these are tokens that if you draw your caravan over, you pick them up, they're points. Now, they're not necessarily just points. They could give you a camel, which is basically a third camel placement on your turn that you can save up for later. Is that better than 1, 2, or 3 points? Who knows? It depends. So it's a little bit of variability. And then the other token is trade goods. By itself, does nothing. Collect 2. 10 points. 10 points is a lot.
Hello, set collection.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of set collection. It's basically saying this token is worth 5 points, but only if you get another one, right? And there's of course like a little bit of a match between them, especially like in games with more players. I think this will be very impactful, where getting a second one is going to be really hard, because how many you put out, there's going to be like, I don't know, 6, 7 maybe, or something like that. It depends on player count, really.
Oh, okay.
Because with higher player counts, the board is bigger, so there's more spaces to put them out.
Yeah.
So, I think there's a lot of interesting tension in that. We played that one just with you and me, and it was fine. It No, I didn't. We had. Oh no, I tricked you into because I ended up with 4 and you ended up with 2, because we thought we were gonna have a tie of 3 versus 3, but actually I somehow managed to engineer getting the 4th one, and I was very proud of that. Anyway, nice module in a higher player count games. For us in a 2-player game, it didn't do much. It was fine, you know.
It introduced a sort of mean element though, because there was one on the board that no one could ever have.
Yes.
Because of the way
the same color caravans can't be next to each other. Yeah.
So there is that. So you could do that more, I guess.
Yeah, that's nice. And we've been saving the best for last. When I said the best, I hated this. I really didn't like it.
Did you really?
I really hated the gin module.
Okay.
I thought it made a very clever game. Very wacky, like really wacky. So this is a stipulation module where you, every time anyone reaches an oasis, you flip a card, and then from the next turn, you can't do what the card says you can't do anymore. So it might say, can't place red camels. Mm-hmm. Cool. No one can place red camels, right? Fun. And it's so random and wild as to what the stipulation is going to be, because you can stop the stipulation at any point. Like if so I can't place red camels, but I can still, draw a teal camel to an oasis. As soon as I do, the stipulation will change for the next round, right? What will it be? Oh, now everyone has to place not 2 but 3 camels, but of different colors, and
I understand. Yeah, my main issue with it was that we banged out quite a lot of them early on because we were trying to go to oases, right?
Well, yeah, you naturally will.
And then we got to a point where it was very, very hard to go to an oasis because we played for quite a long time. It felt like quite a long time. And there was a point where it made it really hard to go to an oasis because we didn't really want to anymore, because we had a camel there already in that caravan or whatever. And so then we were stuck with the card that was face up, which I think the one that was face up was like place 1 camel. And it felt like that's why it felt like it lasted a long time. The game didn't take that long, but it really dragged because we could only place 1 camel. So, and one of the sort of game end conditions is using up all the camels in a pile of 1 color, right? So it was slower, and also it meant that rather than trying to get the points that or moving towards the goals that we had in our heads, like carving out these areas or trying to go towards the villages or whatever we were trying to do, we were just placing a camel and we're going, oh, can I put one next to an oasis somewhere, because I really want this card to change, and it just gummed the game down for me.
It's that, but also my issue with it is that it works against the intended spirit of the game, and the spirit of the game is quite mean and mind games, right? But it stops you from doing the mind games, because it's like, hey, I'm really trying to kind of make you think that this is what I'm going for, right? And if there's suddenly a card that comes out and says, well, no one can do this thing anymore, and it's like, oh, okay, but like that goes to sort of counter against what I was planning to insinuate or whatever, and it just makes everything so very strange and arbitrary and random and wacky. It was very wacky, and I just don't think that.
Sorry,
I mean,
did you think it was wacky? I'm not sure you've said that.
I think it was wacky, Elaine. I think my verdict ultimately, if I had to come up with one word, I think that word would be wacky.
Okay, yeah. No, I agree with it. I didn't hate it, but I did find it a little bit frustrating because you didn't know what was gonna come out. It didn't make it exciting. Like, oh, what's going to come out? It made it like, oh, please don't let it be the one that doesn't let me place yellow camels, because that's the one I really need to build up next. And then it was. So that I just found it a little bit annoying. Okay. But I didn't hate it.
New edition, right? Is it better than the old edition? I don't know. I never played the old edition, but I can say some words about this new edition and what works for me. Now, a lot of reviewers have noted, because we get All Play sends out early review copies. Not to us, because we don't accept review copies. Also, Europe seems to get All Play titles very, very late in comparison to the rest of the world. So everyone's covered on this already and mentioned how the box is too small. And I am going to go into my pocket, put my hand in my pocket. I'm going to pull out some fighting words, right? I can't believe I'm going to say this, but everyone is wrong. And the box is not too small. The box is perfect. The box is absolutely perfect. And if you cannot fit the game and the expansion into this main tiny box, you don't know how to pack board games away.
Wow.
Right?
Wow, Efka.
That is my ultimate verdict. No lid lift, nothing. Everything fits perfectly every time. It just takes a couple extra minutes to put everything away, but it saves so much in shelf space. It doesn't need to be any bigger. It's fine.
Maybe you should make a video on how to repack through the desert.
I mean, it's not the sort of, that would be bordering on content, Elaine. We don't do content.
Because I tried to back it up and went, I can't do this. And you went, it's easy, let me show you. So I don't think for everyone's brain that works as well as yours. I think you've got a good kind of, you can visualize how if I put this in like this is going to work. I'm all right with square things because I was good at packing boxes of books at work, but I'm not very good with weirdly shaped things or things that move like pieces, So I think you're good at that.
Yeah, well, okay. I don't know that I am.
I don't think the box is too small. I like the size of the box.
The size of the box is great, and everything fits into it. So with just a little bit, just some thought goes into packing it away, but not much, because there's not much to pack away. Anywho, there is a misprint on the board. On one of the sides of the board, there's one watering hole missing. All Play says that it doesn't matter if it doesn't exist. Even apparently Knizia says himself that it doesn't matter.
Wow.
I don't know if it doesn't matter. Why is it there to begin with? Is my question. To annoy you, right? And I would appreciate a sticker sent out to everyone who backed the game, because we crowdfunded it. With the people propping up the new edition, right? Please send out a sticker. Other misprints on boards have happened in the past. It's a simple fix. Send out a sticker, right? So that's note number 2. Note number 3, there's a production issue, and the leaders were supposed to be detachable from the caravan, from the camels. they're not. They're glued together in this version. It doesn't affect anything.
No, I don't know why that's. I prefer it like that because I would find that very fiddly to try and.
Sure,
engineer.
agree with you, but they then refer in the rule book with incorrect numbers and stuff like that because they're still planning for future editions for these to come as separate. So I think that's weird. Just, if you can't do it, just stick to it. Just make it, make all editions the same. Why does now someone, I don't know. It doesn't matter really. I don't care about that, but I thought it's worth noting. And I also, there was rules ambiguity in the rule book that is sort of, you read, it says one thing and then the example says a different thing. And I thought, I'll look this up on BGG. And then when I looked it up on BGG, it turns out that I blundered into an age-old debate about Through the Desert rules and how none of the editions seem to, it's clear once you play that this is the rule, what the rule intended is, right? But there is ambiguity in the wording, and it seems to have persisted through multiple editions.
That's annoying.
Yeah. Anywho, some notes on the new edition, but overall, right? I really like this new edition. I think the artwork is nice. I think the box size is nice. I think the pieces are nice. I think everything is really nice.
Can I say one thing? It's a very small thing about the art. I like the art very much, but I found it quite difficult. So in a two-player game, there are parts of the board that you just don't use. There's nothing to block them off. They're just a very slightly different shade of the same colour. So if it's desert, it's daytime desert, it's yellow and then slightly darker yellow. If it's nighttime desert, it's blue and then slightly darker blue, right? But I found it very hard at a glance to differentiate that, and I kept saying to you, is this for us or is this, because we were playing two players, is this for us or is this, and when I looked at it closely, it's fine, but when I was trying to think about where to put the camels and plan it out, and I just found that very hard. So it's not very differentiated. So I don't think it's like a colour vision difference issue, because I don't have colour vision differences, but I just thought it was worth mentioning that it can be tricky.
I see what you mean. I didn't have the same issue as you did, but that, that's a person dependent thing, right? And it's weird, what is the line, do you make it very jarring and then you kind of...
No, I get it why it is like how it is, but I just thought it was worth mentioning. I don't know, are we wrong about that Bazaar expansion? Maybe it's other people's favourite expansion.
Have you played Through the Desert? And more importantly, is Through the Desert something that you always keep returning to? And if it is, please do write in to elaine@nopunIncluded.com and say how you feel even about the idea of this gin expansion with stipulations. I would like to hear from Through the Desert experts or enjoyers. Either way is fine. How they feel about even the potential of this new expansion.
Before we move on, I'm going to read a comment that we got in an email from Greg. I said previously that we didn't want to cover more Salton Sea comments, but as no one has written into us for ages, because no one loves the SEFCA, no one wants to write us emails anymore for some reason, I'm going to read what Greg has said. I'd like to congratulate you both for your entertaining, informative and socially responsible YouTube reviews and podcasts. This is why I'm reading this, because it
right. yeah. I see what's going on.
I listened to your newest podcast on Salton Sea last night and was struck by many things. Firstly, by the unapologetic attempts of greenwashing by this environmentally damaging propaganda hidden in a friendly board game. Secondly, by your courage and suspicion to look into the theme further and call it out for its dangerously inaccurate portrayal of its particular energy mining theme. Finally, a wondering how many other games with an environmental greenwash skin are misguiding an ignorant first world population to keep condoning their wasteful and increasingly destructive lifestyles. That electric cars and solar panels will fix everything while they sleep, or while they plan their next airplane trip, all-inclusive ocean cruise. Let's get more board games or mass media products that promote the real individual lifestyle change that actually has to happen to really earn the green on the box cover instead. The more equity seeking, equality hoping, environment protecting and social justice searching from media producers such as yourselves, the better our world can be. Thank you.
Environmental stuff is incredibly complicated. Sometimes,
Isn't it?
sometimes it's there's so much nuance and so much ambiguity, and sometimes people tend to pick camps. Like, you think this is right, you don't understand. You're in the pocket of big oil or whatever, and it's just this stuff cannot be tribal. We can't be like I'm in this camp, you're in this camp. That means we can never meet. It has to be. Collaborative, but also there has to be like more nuance and more examination, right? We're gonna have to embrace change, but as part of embracing change, we're also going to have to examine whether this new change is good or not. There's so many. Rewilding is a hot topic right now. And so there's farmland that's being rewilded and then turned into kind of like rambling spots and merchandising and stuff like that. So they're reintroducing nature and making some money from that, making use of farmland or whatever. Good, maybe, who knows? There's different opinions on different sides of the camp, and then rewilding has sparked into other kind of trends that are emerging. Like, for example, our council has decided that parks, we're not going to mow them in summer. Who needs that? But apparently, so they stop mowing them in May, and then come the end of June, they mow everything down. And is that good? Some people say it is. Some people who are about rewilding say that it isn't, because what it actually does is that it creates, habitats, and biodiversity, and then it immediately destroys that habitat before anything useful can come out of it. Because if you're rewilding something, you probably need to keep it wild. Is it good to keep a public park wild? I don't know. And is the council doing that just to save some money because Nottingham City Council has gone bankrupt? That's a thing.
That's the thing, yeah.
Again, because of energy as well, right? So that's another environmental issue. It's so complex.
It's so complicated, and it's very hard for us to because we're not experts on
we're
this
board
kind
game
of thing.
reviewers,
We're board
right?
game reviewers. That's what we do. We're not environmentalists.
No.
We just want to do what's right for the bees or people, or that's all the side we're on, really. But you don't know what that is without having good information about it,
and without looking at the issue in not just a kind of a this must be right, or this must be wrong.
That's what I mean.
But more like
it's very contrasting information,
right?
Yeah, incredibly.
Yeah.
I guess there's good and bad in everything, right?
Yeah. Unbeknownst to our listeners, in between the segments, the puppy has woken up and has caused menace and havoc everywhere. Actually, he's been pretty calm today. But now that we've calmed the wild beast, let's talk about different kinds of wild beasts.
Nice.
Leviathan Wilds.
Leviathan Wilds comes from publisher Mooncrab Games by designer Justin Campanian, with art by Samuel R. Shimoda. I said Campaignen wrong. I know I did. Campaignen. That's probably...
Campaignen?
I don't know. I'm very, very, very sorry. Please, someone let me know how to say that name, because I need to learn these names that I keep fudging. What a gem of a game.
That's a strong way to start.
I know, and it's not even really true. I don't know. That's not necessarily my full opinion of it. It's just that it has gems in it.
Oh, I see. Oh,
I was doing a pun.
Oh, I see. Okay, so I think it is a gem of a game. I think this one's
there.
a little special, so get your wallets out, everybody. No, I mean, I don't think this is necessarily for everyone. This is exactly my kind of game. I
like it less.
You like it less?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
But please continue.
Okay. I am jamming with it. I think it's pretty good. So this is, I guess, I don't know. I hesitate to say that Boss Battler is a genre. It feels more like category than a genre, right? If that makes sense, because it's just like, it doesn't really necessarily describe the function of the game. It just describes how some of the game proceeds, right? If it were. So yes, you are basically It's a cooperative game where you build a character by combining two sets of cards. Some of those sets are very small, so that's your character specifically. So they might have one or two cards, and then like their profession, and that's going to have about 8, 9 cards, something like that. Anyway, you pick any two, you combine, mash them, you have your deck, and then you use that deck to climb a tall giant thing. Leviathan cooperatively. And so these Leviathans in this sort of fantasy universe are basically giant things that have been corrupted, and they have these crystal growths on them. So your objective is to destroy the crystal growths, right? So if anyone has ever played, heard, seen the video game Shadows of the Colossus, I think this is, I mean, first of all, this is very obviously inspired by Shadows of the Colossus, but it's also, it's pretty much that game in everything but name and form, right? Which is, of course, because Shadows of the Colossus is a video game, this is a board game, and the name is different, it's Leviathan Wilds, but so many parallels and similarities between the two exist. So I've always been familiar with Shadows of the Colossus. I hadn't played it, but I've played it now because I was quite smitten by our first session of Leviathan Wilds, and I thought, I want to see what the video game this is based on is like. So I got myself a copy on the PS4, and I thought it was good. Like, you know, it's a classic game for a reason, right?
It sounded like you were fibbing then, because you went up. Like, it was good.
Yeah,
like,
no, it was okay. So it's old. Even the remake feels dated. It's got some janky camera.
Controls, yeah.
Yeah, the controls are a bit. Yeah, not my favorite.
Yeah.
Some 2005 platforming, you know, in it. But so, I guess one of the things that the video game does is it creates this great sense of climbing this very tall, precarious living thing that doesn't want you to climb it, and you know it thrashes about, it shakes, and you're trying to hold on, and you know, and it is miraculous, I think, how well, because one of the things that I don't think generally works is video game to board game adaptations. They are wonky and often, very often, bad. I'm looking at Horizon Zero Dawn. My God, that game was so bad. Bloodborne, the board game, no. Didn't work. We've covered both of these, but there's also others. And ironically, we're going to be talking about another video game adaptation in the bonus episode. We'll have our early impressions of Slay the Spire. So if you're a Patreon member, you'll be getting that as you are getting this episode as well. That and spoilers, I think that one also works. But this is very good because it somehow manages to create that really great sense of being very precarious on this Leviathan. And the way it works is that you have this ringbound book, and you kind of, turn the page to the Leviathan that you're fighting. There's 17, so there's a great number of variety. And because this is pretty much a Kickstarter only release, because, I think they're going to have a second crowdfunding campaign, so you'll be able to acquire this. But I don't think there's going to be any copy out there in the wild.
Hey.
The Kickstarter version also comes with a mini expansion that changes up the rules for all the 17 Leviathans. So you have there's really a lot of variety, and so far the Leviathans we've played have all felt quite different. Like they have different rules, and you need to kind of come up with different strategies in terms of what's good and what characters you should bring to it, and how you should try to overcome it. But so you have this ringbound book, you spread it out, and it's like this sort of map of a Leviathan, effectively, and it's got like these sort of climbing points, and it's like a grid, right? But the problem is that anytime your turn begins, much like say in Spirit Island, you are posed with a challenge that the Leviathan is going to do something. You then get to respond to that via your own actions, like evade whatever danger it's posing. And you then it then does the thing that it needs to do, and then turn goes to another player, right? And what you do on your turn is pretty simple. You always have, you probably will always have free cards in your hand, and you have to spend one of them for action points, and you can spend the other two for like various abilities and stuff like that. Like they'll have effects on them as well. So you have this nice little bit of choice. Like, hey, I want the effect on this card, but I also want the action points on this card. But also some spaces on the board are dangerous, and certain cards provide protection from certain kinds of dangers, right? So you can play one card, and you could play the other two cards for their effects, and you're like, cool, I've done this, and I've done that, and I've done that. And then you are forced to redraw back up to 3 cards. And now you notice that the deck is pretty small. It's somewhere between 9... 11 cards at most, I think. And if you're drawing 3 a turn, your deck is going to become empty very, very soon.
And why is that a problem, Efka?
Well, because when your deck is empty, you immediately start falling, right? And on the map, amongst the various grid points, there are ledges, like these sort of safe spots. So a lot of the game is like trying to navigate towards a safe spot right as you run out of cards. But you also don't necessarily want to be on these safe spots, because the safe spots are not your objectives. Your objectives are the various crystals dotted on the Leviathan. And of course, then, they might be close to a safe spot, but not exactly. And what you spend action points on is often either traveling between these various spots or trying to smash the crystals when you are at a crystal. And where it gets complicated is that the maps, they're not simple. There's many gaps and, various dangers dotted about. So, you might want to do things like jumping across or, gliding down, which feels very efficient, where you climb like all the way to the top, but you skip some bits that are important. But gliding down is much more action point efficient. So you go like, swoop, I fall down now, but I'm safe. That's a really cool mechanism that I feel like, I don't know, there's just something very cinematic and fluid about that. And usually cinematic stuff doesn't translate to board games well, but this feels cinematic. This feels like you are just going, right? So I like that. I think that's really nice, right? I like this tension between when to spend cards and how to time them so that, you can reset your deck just as you're on the ledge. I like that there are abilities that, help out other players, if someone start falling, you might have a card that says anchor, and he's like, hey, anchor, and you stop falling, right? And like, hey, you saved your partner or whatever. It's really nice and cooperative in that way, which feels, I don't know, it just feels really fluffy and unique, but also very gamey and crunchy at the same time. And the rules are featherweight, so that's really nice as well. I don't know, I feel like this is such an experiential game. It's hard to transcribe exactly what's so special about it via mechanisms. But I think one of the things that's going to give people a pretty good idea of where it's fun is the Leviathan fret step, where so when your turn starts, you reveal the fret card, right? And these frets, there's only 5 cards, and they keep cycling over and over. You shuffle them up, so you don't know the order each time, but you learn what frets they can do. So, for example, a fret card could be, oh, hey, this Leviathan will deal 2 damage at the spot exactly where you're standing and all the spots around you, right? So you immediately go, aha, okay, I can predict that is going to happen at some point, right? And where it gets really tricky is that if you and your partner are, say, next to each other on adjacent spots, right? And you draw that card and it's like, well, okay, I have time to react, right? I can move down or up or to the side,
but
or whatever.
They don't necessarily.
Right, yeah. And that's a very simple example of what could happen. There's very tricky patterns and diagrams and grids that these frets can invoke, or sometimes they can say, hey, the highest person is going to take 2 damage, and you're like, well, I'm not highest now, but where I want to go is higher than other players, so I will be highest. And it makes you weigh up these considerations a lot. One of the really harsh mechanisms is blight. So you have health damage, so health trickles down, and blight damage, and blight trickles up. If they ever meet, you lose the game, right?
We were close a few times.
Oh yeah, and the sense of danger is really really present. So blight is obviously a timer because health is pretty easy to heal. You just spend action points and you heal up for each action point. But blight is there's very few ways that you can remove it if you get it.
There's some ways to stop it from happening, but once you've got it, it's very hard to get rid of.
Yeah, right. So it's obviously a timer, but also sometimes it's used as a kind of everyone has to scramble now. And the great part is that whilst it's your turn, other players can still play their cards for the effects, not for the action points. And like they maybe have a card that lets them leap out of the way. If they save that card to kind of, because they've assessed that danger could happen. Because again, there's only 5 threat cards, so you learn very quickly what they do. And you need to consider always what you're keeping in your hand, what you're spending to achieve. And that sort of like sense of efficiency that you don't want to spend too many action points bimbling and doing nothing and like healing or whatever. You want to, get these crystals quick, bam, 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 jump up, glide over there. And like, it's fast and cinematic. And I don't know, it's a little bit of a power fantasy, obviously, but it's a fun power fantasy.
Why power fantasy?
Because it feels like, you're playing cards with all these cool effects. You're like getting these characters to do cool things, I don't know. There is a bit of an element of that.
I didn't feel that as much as you, clearly, because I'm sitting here learning from you. Like that didn't come through for me as much as you. And I understand why you like this game so much if you found it like cinematic and this power fantasy. And I didn't hate it by any means. I enjoyed playing it with you, but I didn't get that feeling in the same way that you did. What I did really like about the game, and you mentioned like you only have these 5 threat cards, and they turn round to their more difficult side progressively through the game, but it's not always the same card that comes out on its difficult side, because you shuffle them up again at the end of the round and deal them back out. So you never quite know what you're going to get, but you've got some idea, right? And you can kind of figure out what's left by what's already out on the board, right, out in play. So you think, okay, well, if this comes out, then I've got this card in my hand. If this comes out, then I can do this. And I like that about it, because I like that element of puzzle to it, and it being a cooperative game, like you were saying, it does feel very collaborative. You're not just your own character doing things for yourself, but sort of in conjunction with someone else to try and reach the goal. You're actually trying to help them, and you might have a card that has something that will help both of you or one of you or either of you or whatever. I like that about it. And sometimes those come up at a really, really good moment where the other person is holding their head going, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And you're like, well, would this help? And they're like, yes, this is perfect. And in fact, one of the games that we played, I said to you, if this threat card comes out, I don't think I can do anything about it. And then the threat card did come out. I said anything else would be fine, but if that one comes out, I think we're screwed, right? Yeah. And then that did come out, and you were like, well, let's think about this. And we thought about it, and we just squeaked it. I think I had 1 health. Or, it was so close. It was, hair's width, like closeness. And that felt really good, because it felt like we'd got ourselves, but the game had got ourselves into a situation we couldn't get out of. And then suddenly we did. And that felt really like, yeah. And I guess that was a cinematic kind of moment, like the hero pulls through after all.
Yeah, exactly.
That kind of thing. I get that. I get why you're saying that about it, but I think I just didn't get that same vibe all the way through. There were moments, definitely, but not. I didn't feel it all the time as I was playing as much as you.
I think what I really like is the good sense of escalating tension. So you mentioned that like some of the cards come out on the more difficult side, and the way that works is that at the beginning of the game you deal out 5 cards. They're all going to come out on the normal side, the threat cards from the Leviathan, and then once you go through all 5, you pick them up, shuffle them again, and then you advance the threat of the Leviathan one step, and that means that like one card is now going to come out on its difficult side. It's random as to which one it's going to be, but it's going to be the first one as well. So it immediately hits you like, here's something nasty. And then it's like, okay, easier. And then again, you go through the 5 cards, you pick them up, shuffle them up. Now 2 of them are going to come out on the difficult side. Again, you don't know which of the 2 they're going to be, but again, they're going to be the first ones. It's like, right? Like, okay, things are really progressing, and you feel that like timer ticking, and like you have to climb, jump, like get to the next point, and sometimes, I don't know, sometimes like the card combinations feel so strong and interesting because like they let you come up with clever ways of traversing this terrain, or like just dealing that extra point of damage, or getting that blight protection to strike the thing. I don't know. I think it's very evocative, and I think it will probably really resonate with anyone who has played Shadows of the Colossus. And if you have the ability to do so, and you don't know if you're like Leviathan Wilds, probably a good test measure is to try this video game.
You say that, but I like this. So we played Leviathan Wilds first before we played Shadows of the Colossus, and I found Leviathan Wild a lot more interesting than Shadows of the Colossus because I guess the only thing in Leviathan Wilds that you're missing is that kind of flavour text almost of what the Leviathan is doing that evokes this threat. Like it just is very mechanical, like it will hit this point on the board and this will happen. Whereas
I don't know, I disagree a little bit. I think the very first Leviathan was very simple, and I think like maybe even a bad introduction into the game because like it felt more like an efficiency puzzle rather than anything else, and not even like a good puzzle. It's just like, do this efficiently, and you're like, okay, I will.
But you're
and
learning
then you
your cards, you're learning the characters, you're learning how to do things. I think it's fine.
Yeah, I think it's fine. It just doesn't give the right impression of the game, right? But like the second one, I don't want to spoil too much about the Leviathans and stuff like that. The second one immediately posed a challenge of like, it was a lot more vertical, and like rather than just, well, you can climb anywhere, it's like, no, it has 2 legs and 2 arms and you can climb up on them, right? But you're all separated. And does that matter? Maybe it does, right? Because there's these mushrooms you can pick up. There's sort of like one-time effects. And like you can use them yourself, but you can toss them to a partner as long as they're only 3 spaces away. So there's some incentives to be adjacent to each other, but also a lot of incentives not to be adjacent to each other because like...
You want to spread out to get the crystals, right?
You want to spread out, but also you want to... like avoid these threat effects.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah, because if you're clumped up, you're going to get hit very hard, right? Yeah. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of these, like, considerations that come in from how the Leviathan is different each time. And, again, I don't want to spoil what any more of them do, or anything like that. But the third one immediately felt different. And the way it was different sort of mechanically told me the story of what it is doing to you, Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. I guess I just didn't pick up on that. But maybe that was my own fault because there was nothing that expressly said that. And I was so concentrating on my own cards in my hand and what you could do and what I could do and how to get these crystals. So maybe I just didn't read into that enough.
I think it's easy to get lost in the mechanisms of this game because one of my criticisms of the game is that it feels so fluid and natural, right? But hidden underneath all of that, there is that very old school card game design of steps and timing and sequences that feels very out of place in this game. I don't know why they wanted to incorporate that specificity, or they felt like they needed to.
What do you mean?
Like, so for example, okay, so if you fall, there are multiple reasons why you could fall. An effect from the Leviathan could make you fall. But you could also fall because your deck runs out of cards, and your deck's called your grip. It's like what you're holding on.
Smart, right?
With, right? Yeah, that's nice, right? So you run out of grip, you fall. If someone plays anchor, right, that works if if the Leviathan did something to make you fall, but it doesn't work if grip has run out of cards.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah,
that makes sense. So that's a nitty gritty rule, but it's kind of like, oh, there's a weird rules exception. Okay, I can, that feels still intuitive though, right? Where it stops being intuitive is that basically the rulebook says things like, well, when effect starts happening, you cannot interrupt an effect with another effect. And you're like, oh, okay, so how does that work with falling, right? Because if an effect happens, like you start falling, that's an effect, right? But if you can't interrupt that effect, if I play anchor, it's only gonna happen after the effect resolves. Well, turns out that you cannot interrupt the effect, but the effect is that you are made to fall. The actual falling is not an effect, right?
I see.
And you're like, wait, but that rule only exists because you created a system where it's like, oh, well, this effect goes before that.
So you're talking about like stack sequencing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Just
I see.
Get rid of it. Just let people pick their sequence, right? Like, it doesn't matter that much. I don't know. I feel it's like that feels very 2000s.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. You're right. There is that. It does bring in like rules ambiguities that are unnecessary, that slow down the game, because you're like, oh, how does this work? Is this one of those exceptions, or is this fine, or what do we do? What?
There are actually many ambiguities, and they're not evident when you read the rulebook. There was actually one example of a sequence explained. In the example, they used a Leviathan, that's Leviathan number 4, and it used the Leviathan special rules, which are obviously not in the rulebook. You get the special rules only when you start playing, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but this example
doesn't make any sense.
No sense to me. I don't understand what you're trying to tell me, right?
That's not helpful, is it?
It's not, and the FAQ currently does not exist. Right? Like there's a to be FAQ'd, where the FAQ should be. So it needs at least that FAQ, but I kind of think that the whole timing sequence thing at least needs to be rewritten somewhere and explained properly in more detail, because currently I'm more confused than I need to be.
On a positive point, though, I really liked how the different characters did very different things. So like you said, there's sort of two parts to a character. Like there's like the character and then the class, or whatever it's called in the game. So your character will have certain abilities, and then your class will have certain abilities, and you can mix and match between those. And I played Kestrel as the character. I only really played Kestrel because I like Kate Kestrel from Terrorhawks, but no one knows what that is, so never mind. But I've really liked playing that character, and I've stuck with that character, but then I've changed their class a couple of times so that they do different things, and it's really changed the game and changed how I can do things, which I really like, and I really want to play. There's one, the gambler, that I really want to have a go at, where you literally toss a coin, and if it's heads or whatever, it's this, and if it's tails, it's this. I think that's really funny.
I think it sounds fun and zany in a game that's surprisingly like fun and zany, but in precise ways. Like I think that's why I like it. It has the precision that I enjoy in games. It's like, okay, this is an efficiency puzzle, but also like it has that zaniness of like just wild powers and abilities. And I think that's why, like for me, they're nothing alike. So they're nothing alike, but I am thinking of Spirit Island for some reason. Like the games are completely different, but they are both co-op, and they have this both have this sort of precise moment of like, here's the objectives, here's the movement, here's how you spend and do it. And then you have these like, wild powers that are just like, oh, I can like leap across this thing and, then like strike really hard with blight protect. Oh, this is cool. Or, this character is trying to strike a crystal. I can just, spend this card, push them over the edge, they destroy the crystal. Stuff like that. It feels really fun.
I think the zaniness is really what makes this game shine compared to Shadows of the Colossus.
Yeah.
Because that game is very serious. It comes across as very straight-laced. Right?
Uh-huh.
It's sort of gothic almost, and it's like textures and buildings and setting and this is just like it's very tongue-in-cheek. Like my character even said like something like you're very talkative, which is quite annoying, but whatever, like this kind of tongue-in-cheek cheekiness, light-heartedness to it, and also the fact that you are trying to save these leviathans rather than destroy them. You're doing them a favor by taking these crystals off them.
The Shadows of the Colossus does not tell you why you're doing what you're doing, but from the context clues, you can tell that stuff's pretty grim, right? Like, I mean, it does tell you why you're doing it. It gives you a reason, but the reason feels in a lot of ways abstract and lacking background, right? It's a concrete reason, but like the background is not evident, and how this works is also not evident. Like, so like you just know that because of what you want to achieve, you have to slay these colossi because
colossi is that the plural?
Yes, it is.
Colossi, nice.
Because if you do, you can resurrect this woman who you don't even know why this woman matters to you. You'll find out. But it's so very, like, evidently nefarious, right? Even though the vistas are so serene and, like, it's like, oh, no, this you can tell this is grim. This is grim, right? And violent, right? Because what you do is ultimately very, very violent, and it puts that violence in your face. Like, it never shies away from it, and it doesn't do it for like gratuitous reasons or anything like that. No, it wants you to, like in a horror film, say, to experience something that is deliberately uncomfortable, right? So that's how Shadows of the Colossus feels. This feels nothing like it.
No.
It doesn't want you to experience the violence. It wants you to experience cheeriness and, kind of like a can-do attitude and do-goodery, if that makes sense. So vibes check, completely different. But on a parallel level, what it does manage to achieve is it does manage to achieve that sense of scale. Right? Because the Ringback book does magic here, I think, because whilst it is obviously a 2D surface, right? You're not climbing vertically, but it gives you the sense that you're climbing vertically across something very vast, right? Because once you start jumping and gliding and you find how difficult jumping is, and then, how easy it is to glide down, that gives you that sense of scale, and the artwork on the Ringback book really also elevates that. So there is, strangely, one of the things that was translated from the video game that inspired this game is that cinematic sense of scale, which many board game adaptations of video games really struggled with and often just neglect.
Yeah, we'll have more on this game in video form at some point.
This is early impressions. We've experienced not that many Leviathans out of the 17 yet, and I really want to try the souped up versions as well. This is undeniably going to be on video on our main channel, no pun included. You can find that on YouTube. Just type in no pun included, you'll find it. So
but not yet.
No, yeah, but
we'll do that anyway. Watch our other videos.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, exactly. So there's more video reviews. You can check them out, and we will cover Leviathan Wilds again in more detail because I think it deserves it. Okay, so you are less hot on it than I am, but you still liked it, right?
Correct.
Okay, good.
That's all the games for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have anything to say about anything from this or previous episodes, please let us know. Elaine at nopunincluded.com, because it's literally the only way we know anyone ever listens to this podcast is if anyone writes in. So please let us know your thoughts on anything from this episode or any of the others. Efka, what is on the bonus episode this week and how can people find it?
So we have a short bonus episode this week. People can find it by subscribing to us on Patreon, patreon.com/nopunincluded. That's where you go to support us, and you will be supporting independent board game media, which is pretty important. Games media is really struggling right now, and there's closures and layoffs and difficulties. And
we might have to lay off Sydney if
we're not laying off Sydney.
Okay.
He's currently doing a very good job of having a nap. It's a very good nap it is. So yeah, please do support us. Support others as well. But if you do, when you support us, you'll be sure that, hey, we don't take review copies, we don't take sponsorships from publishers, and we put out bonus episodes of this podcast. On the bonus episode, we will have our early impressions of Slay the Spire, the board game, which is a board game also based on a video game, also called Slay the Spire, which itself is based on a board game mechanism, deck building, which was invented by a board game called Dominion. It all goes in a circle like some sort of a card Ouroboros. And the game of the episode.
I didn't ask you that, but go ahead.
I jumped the shark.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's okay. Continue.
Yeah. I mixed my idioms there. Jumped the shark. That's not what that. Anyway. The game of the episode is predictably, for me, Leviathan Wilds, and for you,
Spectral.
Yeah, there you go.
But Through the Desert comes a close second.
I know, right?
Episode,
yeah, close second.
They were all pretty good.
You know what? Like, weirdly, we're kind of coming at this from different angles, because if for you Through the Desert is a close second, for me Through the Desert is also a close second. Puts Spectral third and puts Leviathan Wilds for you third. Funny episode. But with that, why don't you say goodbye, Elaine?
Goodbye, Elaine.
Goodbye, Elaine.